Chapter 30, 187. The female doctor examined Lin Cece seriously, but as she treated her professionally, she posted on her WeChat moments to complain. She secretly took a photo of Lin Cece and Gu Zhe, and the content was very simple. She felt sorry for Best Actor Yi. He was cheated on. His rumored girlfriend was tearing him apart with a man in the middle of the night. The speed of the photo was as fast as the speed of light. After posting it, the female doctor helped Lin Cece up and said gently, "Apply some medicine and take some anti-inflammatory medicine. Otherwise, it will affect your pregnancy in the future." Affect pregnancy. These 3 words stunned Lin Cece. Not only her, but even Gu Zhe was also a little dazed. Because Lin Cece couldn't be pregnant. Lin Cece listened and smiled faintly. "I got it." With that, she looked at Gu Zhe. "Help me get the medicine. Sorry to trouble you." The female doctor had just posted it, but looking at her current attitude and expression, it didn't seem like the relationship between a sugar daddy and a small celebrity. So the female doctor took a pen and pretended to be doing official work. "What's your relationship?" "Ex-husband and wife." "She's my wife." They said it almost at the same time. Then the doctor couldn't stay calm. If their relationship was like this, if she was annoyed, she could sue her and go to jail. Lin Cece probably thought she had misunderstood, so she confirmed again. "We're ex-husband and wife, not anymore." Gu Zhe's face was a little ugly, but he didn't flare up. He went to get the medicine for her and came back. The female doctor had already secretly deleted her post, but she didn't know that it had been forwarded. She watched as Gu Zhe and Lin Cece left and sighed. Actually, they seemed to be more compatible. On the other side, Gu Zhe put Lin Cece back in the car and got in. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel and turned his head. "Go to my place and rest for a while?" Lin Cece was obviously a little stunned. She didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, she slowly said, "I want to go home." Gu Zhe looked at her. "Go to my place, and I'll give you the household registration." She looked up at him with sour eyes, as if she wasn't too sure. Gu Zhe smiled faintly. "You don't believe me?" She didn't make a sound and quietly let him start the car. However, when they arrived at Gu Zhe's villa, he placed her on the bed in the master bedroom and brought water for her to take her medicine. However, he did not mention anything about the household registration. Lin Cece was a little uneasy. "Didn't you say you were going to give me that?" Gu Zhe stood by the bedside and gazed at him deeply. After a long time, he said in a low voice, "Lin Cece, just now when we made love, did you feel anything?" His voice was a little gentle, probably because he was a little lost at the moment. Lin Cece pursed her lips. "We should be having sex just now, not making love." He stared at her, his gaze so profound it seemed to embed itself in her soul. Lin Cece's body trembled, but she didn't make a sound, nor did she compromise. After a long time, Gu Zhe sighed. "Are you thinking that this is rape?" His gentleness was actually overbearing. Lin Cece suddenly got angry. She glared at him and sneered. "Mr. Gu, you obviously know. Why do you have to say it?" There was a hint of bitterness in his eyes, and he sneered. "Didn't you ask me if I wanted you last time? If I hugged you, you wouldn't be happy?" Chapter 30, 188. This time, Gu Zhe grabbed her slender neck fiercely and threw her onto the soft bed. Her body was already in pain. This time, it was worse than death. Gu Zhe held her face and kissed her forcefully. Lin Cece refused, so he pressed her hand down so that she would not have a chance to escape. But he didn't continue. Instead, he looked at her deeply and asked, "Does it hurt a lot?" Lin Cece pursed her lips and didn't say anything for a long time. She looked very stubborn. Gu Zhe lowered his head and deliberately bit her lips. He lowered his voice and said, "If you don't say anything, let's do it a few more times." She immediately widened her eyes and looked at him, her eyes filled with shock. After a long time, she said with difficulty, "Why? Isn't it good for us to be apart? You have a fiancé, and I have my own life. We don't interfere with each other. Mr. Gu is so powerful now. There's really no need for you to do anything for me." Lin Cece pursed her lips and seemed to be mocking herself. Guze held her wrist with one hand and said in a low voice, "Because you used me for Yi Mubai. So, you didn't intend to rape me at the beginning, did you?" The mockery in Lin Cece's eyes deepened. Guze sneered and suddenly sat up. He handed her the phone on the bedside table and said, "Didn't you say that I would rape you? Call the police." Lin Cece held the phone and bit her lips. "Don't think that I don't dare. Then call the police." Guze's face revealed an extremely arrogant expression, and then with a swoosh, he took off her coat. Not only that, but almost all of her clothes were stripped off. He leaned against her ear and gently bit the soft flesh on her ear with his thin lips. "Didn't you say that I would rape you? Call the police." Guze. "You bastard." Lin Cece was so angry that she shouted. Guze chuckled. "You don't dare?" With that, he began to kiss her passionately, as if he wanted to do it again. Lin Cece bit her lip and leaned her head against the pillow weakly. She said very softly, "I will really call the police." "You report it," Guze said carelessly and continued to kiss her. Lin Cece's hand that was holding the phone was trembling, and she couldn't make a sound for a long time. Guze sneered. "You're not going to fight?" He leaned over her and dialed the number for her. When she heard the beeping sound, Lin Cece was shocked and immediately threw the phone away as if she was scalded by something. Guze's eyes firmly fell on her face. After staring for a long time, he lowered his head and continued. But this time, he wasn't as rough as before. Instead, he kissed her very gently. He was indulgent and seemed to be deeply doting on her. When he pried her lips apart, she was resistant, but he would not allow her to escape. He kissed her deeply, forcing her to join him. In the end, he didn't take her, but her body was enjoyed by him for a long time before he let go. Lin Cece was sweating all over. Panting, she turned her little face to the side, looking a little embarrassed. Guze propped himself up and looked at her. He suddenly said, "I haven't thought about it yet." She suddenly opened her eyes and looked at him. "Lin Cece, give me some time to think about it," he said in a low voice and even lowered his head to nibble on her lips. It was a very intimate taste. Lin Cece was stunned for a moment, then smiled bitterly. "What is Mr. Gu thinking about? Are you thinking about lowering yourself to start a fruitless love or a short marriage with me?" "It's a relationship," he said in a low voice. He was also unhappy with her attitude. Lin Cece laughed mockingly. After laughing, she leaned her head against his pillow and looked at him quietly. "Mr. Gu, I don't want it anymore." Chapter 30, 189. Guze stared at her as if he hadn't heard it. He asked again, "What did you say?" "Mr. Gu, I don't want it anymore." Lin Cece smiled lightly. "I want to start a new life. Whether it's me or the little fool in your heart, it's all in the past. I want to get out of your life." His face became very ugly. It seemed that she had a special feeling about the words "you" and "the little fool in your heart." The atmosphere was a little stiff. Lin Cece was still lying down. She smiled softly. "Even if you don't admit that I am her, I am her. Unless I die, Guze, you can really separate me from her. Do you want me to die?" The veins on Guze's forehead popped out, and he stared at her. Lin Cece shook her head gently and said again, "I don't want it anymore, Guze." Guze's face was cold. "Is it because of Yimubai? Is it because of the appearance of an outstanding man, so you don't care about me?" "Lin Cece, let me tell you, Mr. Gu, I know what you told me and thank you, but it has nothing to do with Mubai. He is a very good friend of mine." Lin Cece lowered her eyes. "I also want to protect him, so please don't involve him in the things between you and me." Her protection of Yi Mubai made Guze very uncomfortable. He stared at her. "You want to protect him?" "Yes, every sincere person should be treated well." She didn't flinch. Guze smiled. "What do you think Yi Mubai will think if you come to me? He and I are friends." Lin Cece looked at him. "And we, even if we have sex, we are still strangers." Guze approached her. "You haven't slept with him, have you?" Lin Cece opened her eyes wide and kept looking at him. Gu Zhe smiled gently and stepped back. It's very interesting. He got up and didn't force her anymore. He walked out on his own. As soon as he left, Lin Cece felt her whole body heave a sigh of relief, and she collapsed onto the bed. She had lain in this place before. At this moment, her mood was completely different. That time, in order to take revenge, she seduced Gu Zhe during his engagement. Her mind was filled with revenge, but now she was much more relaxed. She liked him very much. Otherwise, she wouldn't have run to the hospital in the middle of the night to ask him if he still wanted her. He didn't want it. He had said so many harsh words. She felt that they should end it here. Perhaps they were not suitable for each other. She had let go of a lot of things, but he had not. She didn't like to force things. Sometimes, the emotional point was that moment. After that moment, Lin Cece would no longer run to the hospital in the middle of the night to woo a man shamelessly. When everything cooled down, she felt it was over. Her leg was still hurting, and her head was dizzy, but Lin Cece still sat up and looked at the dark night outside. After sitting for a while, she got up and stood in front of the French window, drawing the curtains. The night wind was very cold, and it was cold everywhere. But she still needed to do this to keep her mind calm. Today, Gu Zhe's proposal was very tempting, but she didn't agree. He said that he hadn't thought about it, but she couldn't afford to wait for someone anymore. Chapter 30, 190. She fell asleep in a daze, vaguely feeling that the mattress beside her had sunk deep into her. Lin Cece opened her eyes and saw Gu Zhe sitting next to her. It was early in the morning, and he seemed to have taken a shower. There was a particularly refreshing smell on his body, and he was neatly dressed in a kind of outing clothes, a classic black and white suit. You're awake. Gu Zhe's voice was quite indifferent. I have something to do in a while. You go back if you're okay. This is your household registration. With that, he put something in her hand. Lin Cece looked down and saw that it was a household registration page. You can move it whenever it's convenient. Gu Zhe looked at her deeply. I'm going to the airport now for a business trip abroad. There are servants at home who can cook. You can leave after eating. Lin Cece had leaned against the pillow. She felt that her head was very hot, her body was also hot, and her back was covered in hot sweat. She knew that her fever was probably very serious. She should ask him to stay and let him take her to the hospital, but she looked at his indifferent face and didn't say anything. Gu Zhe's eyes quietly fell on her face. After a moment, he got up and said, I'm leaving. That's all. Don't let me see you again. Lin Cece looked down. I'll leave here as soon as possible. That's true. He nodded in agreement. If you stay here, Yi Mubai will be unhappy. Lin Cece wanted to refute, but after thinking about it, she didn't say anything. Gu Zhe got up and the mattress also got up. She looked up at him. Gu Zhe also smiled slightly, but there was no smile in his eyes. I also feel that we don't seem to be fated. We always go around in circles. Lin Cece, this time we really separate. Don't see each other again. Her throat seemed to be blocked by something, and she felt a little uncomfortable. They finally came to the time when they could face each other calmly, but usually it was time to say goodbye. Lin Cece nodded and only said one word. Okay. Gu Zhe looked at her for the last time and slowly walked out. The moment the door closed, Lin Cece gently fell back on the pillow. She was very sleepy and tired, and she wanted to sleep. She closed her eyes and felt that her life had been very, very long, so long that she almost didn't know what to do. She fell asleep and vaguely felt that her body was very, very hot. She wanted to get up, but couldn't. Last night, she had acted willfully and ended up like this. When the fever was unbearable, she wanted to cry, but she couldn't. She vaguely felt that she had lost something, but she couldn't think of what it was. She had a fever upstairs and was finally discovered by the servants of Gu Zhe's house. By that time, 4 hours had passed. The servant panicked and called Gu Zhe. Gu Zhe's cell phone could not be reached on the private plane. The servant had no choice but to call 120. The door of the villa was guarded by reporters. When Lin Cece was carried out, her pajamas were stained with blood. Coupled with the female doctor's WeChat moments, it was definitely a drama of torture. The servants in the house were shocked because there was a lot of blood on the bed upstairs. She called Guze again, but Guze couldn't be reached, and the servants couldn't contact Wenwan. Because Miss Wen was Mr. Gu's fiancée, Mr. Gu had to know about it since it was such a big deal. Chapter 30, 191. Su Qiaonan picked up the phone. Su Qiaonan listened for a few seconds and hung up the phone. She was silent for a long time before she walked towards Guze. Guze was dealing with business. He saw Su Qiaonan coming over and asked, "What's the matter?" Su Qiaonan pursed her lips and said softly, "President Gu, something happened in City B. What's the matter?" Guze looked up and thought it was just business. Su Qiaonan said softly, "It's Lin Cece. She was sent to the hospital, and I heard that she lost a lot of blood. She was in President Gu's villa at the time." Guze's brows immediately furrowed. He muttered to himself, "What's going on?" Su Qiaonan didn't say anything. Why would President Gu ask her about such a thing? President Gu should know what was going on. The lower half of the body was covered in blood. For a woman, it was just that kind of thing. Just thinking about it made Su Qiaonan's lips tremble unnaturally. She couldn't understand the entanglement between her boss and Lin Cece. But no matter what, she couldn't hide this kind of thing, so she whispered, "I heard that. President Gu's servants said that it might be a miscarriage." Miscarriage? Guze narrowed his eyes. How could it be a miscarriage? Lin Cece shouldn't be able to give birth. Probably, he had never verified it. It was just a rumor. He and Lin Cece had sex once or twice recently, and she almost couldn't get pregnant. This child, while Guze was thinking, Su Qiaonan said, "President Gu, do you want me to confirm it again?" Guze was a little confused, and he didn't want his secretary to be too involved in Lin Cece's private affairs, so he waved his hand. "I'll make the call myself." He closed the document and made the call himself. He didn't call home, but called Yimubai. After the phone rang a few times, Yimubai answered and said in a hoarse voice, "She's having an operation. The child is gone." At that moment, Guze's heart felt like it was weightless and fell to the bottom. His voice was slightly hoarse. "What are you talking about?" "Cece had a miscarriage." Yimubai asked very seriously, "It was your child, wasn't it?" Guze was silent for a moment, then said very slowly, "I don't know. I'll ask Lin Cece." Yimubai's voice suddenly became extremely low. "Guze, if you need to ask her, then I advise you not to." Guze was stunned. Yimubai said very softly, "The child is mine." With that, he hung up the phone. On Guze's side, a beeping sound came from the phone. When he heard this sound, his heart suddenly tightened. Su Qiaonan walked over and asked him softly, "President Gu, we will arrive at the airport in 2 hours, and the contract will be signed 3 hours later. What do you think? After signing the contract, arrange for a private flight back to China immediately." Guze's voice was very decisive. Su Qiaonan wanted to say something, but still didn't say it. Guze returned to B City 24 hours after the incident. He went to the hospital where Lin Cece was, and the entrance of the hospital was surrounded by reporters. As soon as the reporters saw him, they immediately swarmed up. "Mr. Gu, what do you think about Miss Lin's miscarriage? Yimubai has already admitted that the child is his. Do you really not mind spending the night with a pregnant woman?" Guze's face was dark. He walked slowly, and the security guards around him stopped those people from approaching Guze. Chapter 30, 192. Guze glanced over. His expression was especially cold. He said coldly, "Mubai is my friend." After saying that, he strode into the hospital. The ward on the 24th floor was very deserted. Because this was a VIP ward, there were only a few rooms on each floor. Guze stood at the door of the ward. Just as he was about to push the door open, Yimubai happened to come out from inside. When he saw Guze, he didn't seem surprised at all. He just looked at him quietly. After a while, he said in a hoarse voice, "You're back." Guze's face was full of exhaustion. Is she inside? I want to see her. Yimubai still looked at him quietly and didn't say anything. Don't tell me you won't even give me this chance? Guze whispered. I always. He actually couldn't say anything for a moment. Yimubai smiled faintly. Of course. When he passed by Guze, he whispered, I'm with Cece. Guze's body trembled. Yimubai looked into his eyes and said calmly, I don't know who the child is. That's not important. I want her. I want her to be happy. I don't want her to be like this anymore. As he said that, he smiled faintly. I know that Cece went to your place. I thought that if you really liked her and she couldn't let go of you, you two could still be together. But when I heard that you weren't sure about the child, I knew that it was impossible for you two to be together. Cece wouldn't want a man who didn't trust her. Guze's fingers clenched into a fist. She told you that? She didn't need to tell me. Yimubai was still calm. There are a lot of things that I can guess. Guze, she really loved you, but now her heart should be broken. Guze's voice was stifled. Tell her that I said I wasn't sure if the child was mine. Yimubai leaned against the wall. He turned his head and stared at Guze. After a while, he smiled faintly. I told the public that the child was mine. Do you think she wouldn't be able to guess? He sighed again. Guze, she is no longer that little fool. She is no longer that person who will not resist no matter what you do to her. For a moment, something in Guze's heart broke out of its cocoon. He wanted to hold on to it, but he felt himself falling away again. A long, long time later, Guze kept thinking in his heart, if he hadn't gone on the business trip that day, if he had trusted Lin Cece a little more, would she not have left him? He looked at Yimubai for a while. Under Yimubai's gaze, he gently pushed open the door of the ward. Lin Cece was lying quietly. There was no trace of blood on her small face. Lin Foran was accompanying her. When Lin Foran saw Guze, her expression was very complicated. She got up and said lightly, Let's talk. No matter what, she was his ex-mother-in-law. Guze had to give her some face. He followed Lin Foran to the living room outside. Lin Foran went straight to the point. Guze, you shouldn't come to the hospital in the future. She is not worthy of our Cece. Guze's throat seemed to be blocked. He was silent for a few seconds before he asked, How is she? Very bad. Lin Foran said lightly, The child is gone. Do you think she can get better? Guze wanted to speak, but Lin Foran stopped him. This child came unexpectedly. It may be the only child in Cece's life. Don't ask who the child is. I think Cece will answer you and say it is her own. Guze's heart trembled. It's mine, isn't it? Chapter 30, 193. Thus, Guze understood that the child was his. For a moment, he was stunned and his face was pale. But Madame Lin still wanted to continue. She said softly, Mubai has already told the public that the child is his. Cece may also consider him. So, Mr. Gu, it doesn't matter who the child is. What's important is the future. Do you understand? At that moment, Guze's eyes stung. His heart, his muscles, and his bones were aching together. He tried his best to smile, but it was difficult. Finally, he looked at Madame Lin and asked softly, Can I see her? Madame Lin hesitated again and again. Guze immediately said, Don't worry, I won't do anything out of line. The current situation was clear to them. If he came out and fought with Yimubai, the consequences would be unimaginable. This matter would become unpredictable. Guze was not such a person. He even thought bitterly in his heart. A few years ago, he could abandon her. Now he could. But he felt that his heart was empty. No, the empty place was now like a bloody hole. He felt that he could never fill it again. Guze slightly closed his eyes. He wanted the pain to slowly pass. But it became more and more painful. In the end, it was so painful that he almost became numb. At this time, Madame Lin said, I will ask Cece. Then she looked at Guze deeply. Guze nodded slightly. After Madame Lin entered the ward, he found that his fingers were clenched into fists and were wet with sweat. He loosened his fingers and waited anxiously in anticipation. About 5 minutes later, Madame Lin came out. Her eyes were somewhat complicated. "Go in, I will wait outside." Her expression was somewhat hesitant to speak. Guzé pursed his lips and walked in. The VIP ward was filled with the smell of disinfectant. Usually, Guzé didn't think much of it. But now he felt that it was very pungent. The light was too white. He slowly walked over and looked at the person lying on the bed. She was lying there lifelessly. Her face was pale, like a flower that had lost its moisture. Her eyes were open as she watched him approach. "Cece." Guzé's voice was extremely hoarse. He didn't expect it to be like this. Lin Cece's eyes opened into a slit. She looked like a wounded animal, her eyes full of pain. Guzé softly called her name. She smiled faintly, but that smile seemed to freeze at the corner of her mouth. Her entire body was motionless. "You're here." She was still looking at him, not moving. Guzé noticed that there were tubes all over her body, connected to all kinds of instruments. He quietly asked, "Does it hurt?" Lin Cece's eyes became moist. She shook her head very slowly, and after a while, she nodded. "It hurts, Cece." Lin Cece's words. Lin Cece's. S. Lin S. Lin was. Lin Bess. He raised his eyes abruptly and looked straight into hers. At this moment, his eyes were filled with a storm, while hers was the calm after the storm. They were always out of step, never loving each other at the same time. Guzé stared into her eyes and slowly said, "Lin Cece told me that the child is mine, right?" Her eyes shrunk. She looked down as if she didn't dare to look into his eyes. She softly said, "It's not important." Chapter 30, 194. Lin Cece looked at him and didn't say anything. Guzé's face was full of depression. He clenched his fists and punched the head of the bed. With a bang, his fist was immediately stained with blood, and Lin Cece's face became even paler. Guzé didn't care about his injury and said in a low voice, "Lin Cece, are you in pain now?" She was stunned and nodded very slowly. He also nodded and smiled. "I'm in pain too." His eyes met hers, and he suddenly lowered his body, bringing his head close to her lower abdomen. Lin Cece's body trembled, and her face was as pale as snow. She asked with a trembling voice, "Guzé, what do you want to do?" He didn't care about her and kept pressing his face against her belly. His bloody palm gently touched her there, and his voice was so hoarse, as if he hadn't slept for 3 days. "Lin Cece, if the child is saved, is there still a chance for us?" She was stunned. Guzé didn't say anything else. He just pressed his face against her belly and didn't want to move away. After a long time, she said, "Guzé, there's no if. We've missed so much." She was very weak, but she insisted on finishing her words. "We've always been like this. So let's end it." As she spoke, she felt a warm sensation seeping into her from his face, which was very uncomfortable on her skin. Her heart skipped a beat. She stretched out her hand and touched his face. It was Guzé's face. It was wet. He was crying. "Guzé." Lin Cece smiled in a trance. "Why are you crying?" "The child is gone, but you'll have another child in the future." Guzé's fingers clenched her hospital gown, and her clothes were dyed red with blood. But they didn't care at this time. Maybe it was really the last time. Guzé said in a low and hoarse voice, "Lin Cece, do you hate me?" He was the one who raped her. That was why they lost the child. She should hate him. Yes, she should hate him. But how could she forgive him and be with him again? Lin Cece was silent for a long time before she whispered, "I don't hate you anymore, Guzé. If the little fool in the past tried her best to like you, then I don't think she wanted to hate you. It's just that we were never meant to be together." Guzé closed his eyes tightly. His cold and hard face tightened. His fingers tightened again almost to the point of pain. But she endured. It hurt, but not as much as it did when she lost her child. She didn't want to experience that kind of heart-wrenching pain again. She had suffered for him 3 times. That was enough. After a long time, Guze whispered, Lin Cece, what if I don't let go? She probably didn't expect him to be like this. After being stunned for a while, she said in a low voice, Guze, it's impossible between us. Because of Mubai. His voice became cold again, as if he could not accept this result. Lin Cece paused for a long time before she whispered, is it because of this child that you feel that we can still be together? But Guze, this child is gone. It was never because of Yi Mubai between us, but because we don't trust each other. Chapter 30, 195. He didn't know why, but Guze asked, do you have Mubai in your heart? Lin Cece didn't answer his question. She just weakly closed her eyes. At that moment, Guze understood that no matter who she had in her heart, there wouldn't be a place for him. Guze. At that moment, his feelings were very complicated. He wanted to make her stay, but he didn't know how to do it. He stared at her little face for a long time before he said in a low voice, I've never been a soft-hearted person, and I've never regretted my choice. But if I could do it all over again, I would make a different choice. Lin Cece closed her eyes. Her long eyelashes couldn't stop trembling. It was a heartbreaking tremble. Guze leaned forward and slowly moved closer. When his temperature became hotter and his lips got closer, Lin Cece suddenly opened her eyes. Their eyes met, and they were very close. His lips touched hers. He didn't go deep, just a light touch. Her eyes widened. Guze looked into her eyes as if he could see into her soul. I've lost you, haven't I, little fool? When he said that, Lin Cece's tears fell instantly. She couldn't stop her tears from falling, and her face was almost covered in tears. He called her little fool. He finally admitted that she was a little fool in his heart, but they could never go back. She looked at him, and her lips couldn't stop trembling. Guze, I can only call you Lin Cece from now on. His lips parted slightly, and his voice was extremely hoarse. I know. In the end, he still let go of her, but his eyes were still entangled with hers, unwilling to leave. Lin Cece bit her lower lip and looked down. Mr. Gu, you should go. He didn't say anything and continued to look at her. Lin Cece kept her eyes down and didn't dare to look at him again. She was afraid that she would regret it if she looked at him again and would hug him. She would hug him and ask, Guze, do you still want me? Guze looked at her deeply and whispered, I'm going. He said he was going, but he couldn't move a single step. Lin Cece slowly lay down and closed her eyes. I'm a little tired. He no longer had any reason to stay. When Guze walked out, he saw Yi Mubai and Madame Lin. Madame Lin silently entered the ward to accompany Lin Cece. Yi Mubai looked at Guze and said calmly, Let's talk. Guze nodded. He knew that this conversation wasn't going to be easy, but at this moment, he needed to be clear-headed, even if it was very painful. The two men arrived at the rooftop. The wind whistled loudly. Yi Mubai looked at Guze. Without saying anything, he threw a punch at him. This ruthless strike caused Guze to take a few steps back, and a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He didn't resist, nor did he counterattack. He just looked at Yi Mubai. Come on. Yi Mubai didn't hold back. The second and third punches followed in the wind. There was also Yi Mubai's angry roar. Do you know what this child means to her? This may be her last chance to be a mother. How could Guze not know? He was punched again and again. Every punch hit his flesh. It was very painful, but only that kind of pain could wake him up a little. Only that kind of pain could make him feel that he was truly alive. After countless punches, Yi Mubai was tired. Guze lay on the ground of the rooftop and looked up at the sky. Chapter 30, 196. Yi Mubai stood and panted. You've given up? Guze lay on the bed and smiled helplessly. What else can I do? He looked up at the sky and watched the clouds floating in the sky. His voice was tinged with unspeakable pain. Take good care of her for me. Yi Mubai stared at his eyes. Guze, have you ever thought that she still needs you? He sneered. You always let go so easily.
No.
Gu Zhe closed his eyes. Mubai, she really doesn't want me this time. Yi Mubai froze for a moment. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't say a word. And Gu Zhe, after lying on the bed for a long time, finally struggled to stand up. He picked up his dusty coat and patted it. He smiled bitterly. I'm leaving. After that, he walked towards the exit step by step. Every step he took was very difficult, and every step he took was extremely painful. Every step he took was like digging a hole in his heart, and it was dripping with blood. But he still had to smile. His woman was pregnant with his child, but he was not by her side. He even suspected that the child was not his. Yi Mubai told the public that the child was his now. He had nothing left. The child, the little fool, Lin Cece, they were all gone. The bright sun shone on him. He raised his hand to block the sunlight and looked up at the sky. He felt that it was so dazzling. Gu Zhe showed a smile. That smile was very complicated. It was a little self-deprecating and indescribable. It was not the first time he liked someone. He had liked Qin Mu silently for 8 years. But that kind of love could be fulfilling. As long as she was living well, he did not mind waiting silently. But this time was different. Lin Cece's departure had dug a hole in his heart. She had taken away something that belonged to him. Even if she was happy in the future, he would feel that it was a pity. Maybe it was because they had been husband and wife. Although it was so short, she used to belong to him. She was Gu Zhe's wife. Gu Zhe left the hospital. He did not go home. Instead, he went to the villa in Sea City. He went to the backyard and stood in front of the small mound he had buried. He slowly knelt down and dug out the dirt bit by bit. He took out the bag containing the sweater. When he opened it, the clumsily handmade sweater was still very new, as if it hadn't been through the baptism of time. It was as if everything was in perfect condition, as if his little fool was still waiting for him in this villa. Every time he came over, she would throw herself at him, call his name, and say that she missed him so much. Gu Zhe hugged the sweater in his arms and whispered, I suddenly realized that I've been very bad to you. A long time ago, I thought that I liked you very much and even fell in love with you. In fact, it wasn't love. It was just like a child who found a novel toy. Once I realized that the toy wasn't fun, I decisively threw it away. Now, it's impossible for me to have it again. He smiled bitterly and hugged the sweater. A hot tear slowly fell from the corner of his eye. Under the autumn sun, it was sparkling and dazzling. Gu Zhe waited in Sea City for a day. When he returned, he restarted the operation of the villa. He hired a few gardeners and cleaners. He maintained everything in his and Lin Cece's master bedroom. He even got someone to turn on Cece's favorite musical fountain all day, even when she was not around. When he returned to B City, he brought the sweater with him and wore it close to his body. Chapter 30, 197. Later, several things happened in B City. Lin Cece quit the entertainment industry, and the Yi family was in crisis. For a time, it was as unstable as the Lin family. At the critical moment, Yi Mubai and Bai Shuili got engaged. Moreover, Yi Mubai quit the entertainment industry and helped the Yi family behind the scenes. All these things happened in just a few days, which caught people off guard. It was only 2 months after Lin Cece's miscarriage. Gu Zhe put down the newspaper in his hand. After a long silence, he suddenly took his coat and walked out of the office. Outside, Su Qiaonan looked at him in surprise. President Gu, you're going to go on a business trip soon? Business trip? The muscles on Gu Zhe's face twitched. He immediately remembered that he missed Lin Cece last time because he was on a business trip. If he hadn't left, Cece's child wouldn't have been lost. If he hadn't gone on a business trip, he and Lin Cece would have had a chance to get back together because of the child, but now Gu Zhe smiled, but his tone was firm. No matter what it is, push it to the back. I have personal matters to deal with these 3 days. Su Qiaonan asked instinctively, Is it Lin Cece? Gu Zhe narrowed his eyes. He had never liked Su Qiaonan to ask too much about his personal affairs. Now that Su Qiaonan had asked again and again, he was a little annoyed. Secretary Su, I told you not to ask about my personal affairs. Su Qiaonan said bluntly. President Gu, go find Lin Cixi, but please don't forget Miss Wen. When Xian was still Gu Zhe's fiancée in name. If President Gu chose to find Lin Cixi, he had to get rid of Wen Xian first. Gu Zhe paused and turned to look at Su Qiaonan. He said faintly, I got it. Then, he quickly walked into the elevator. He went to the villa, where Lin Cixi usually lived. She wasn't at home. Only Auntie Li was there. With the help of Yi Mulin, Auntie Li's daughter had successfully returned to China. Now, Auntie Li was helping Lin Cixi in her villa. However, Gu Zhe knew that Lin Cixi would soon be unable to afford such a villa after she quit the entertainment industry. However, he still didn't say too much to Aunt Li. He just gave her a business card. C-City is the same as before. Also, if you want to find a job in the future, you can come to me. Auntie Li had been in a daze the whole time. She stammered, Mr. Gu, Cici's parents live in a city. Do you have the address? Gu Zhe asked softly. Auntie Li paused for a moment and said, yes, yes. She ran back into the house and handed him a note. Cici gave this to me. Gu Zhe reached out and took it. Looking at the delicate handwriting on it, with a few piggy symbols in it, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, but at the same time, he felt a little sad. After going through so many things, he was actually very happy that his Cici could still retain such a childlike innocence. Auntie Li smiled at him and whispered, Mr. Gu, you can't let Cici know what I said. Gu Zhe came back to his senses. Okay, I won't say it. Also, call me Gu Zhe from now on. Of course not. Mr. Gu is Mr. Gu. Auntie Li refused and waved her hand. In her heart, she secretly thought, maybe there won't be a future. Gu Zhe didn't know that Auntie Li was thinking so much, so he said goodbye. Chapter 30, 198. Gu Zhe could see through the black carved door that the small garden inside was particularly well maintained. Madame Lin and Mr. Lin were strolling in the courtyard, looking very serene. Gu Zhe waited for a while, but did not see Lin Cixi, so he took out a cigarette and lit it, quietly waiting. About 10 minutes later, Madame Lin saw him, thought for a moment, then walked over to open the door. Compared to the last time, Madame Lin's expression was a lot more relaxed, probably because her mood had also calmed down. Gu Zhe threw away the cigarette butt, stepped on it, and nodded to Madame Lin with a smile. Mother. He and Cici had been husband and wife for a short time, but rarely had the opportunity to see Madame Lin, let alone call her mother. This call made Madame Lin somewhat stunned. After a long time, she recovered and faintly smiled. Mr. Gu's words are too heavy. I may not be able to bear this title. Gu Zhe had been in the business world for a long time. Naturally, he was very proficient in the ways of the world. In his heart, he understood Madame Lin's conflict with him. He did not force it, but tactfully smiled. I and Cici have been husband and wife. Now it is polite to call her this. For a moment, Madame Lin really did not know what to say, but after thinking for a moment, she directly said, Are you looking for Cici? She did not come back. Gu Zhe frowned. She is not living in B City. Madame Lin faintly smiled. She has already put that villa up for sale. Later she will move to a smaller apartment. Maybe she will come back to a city to live with us. Gu Zhe was stunned. Back to a city? She did not stay in B City? In his heart, he understood what this meant to Lin Cixi. It meant that she had let go of everything, including him, Gu Zhe. He did not say anything for a long time. Madame Lin could see his thoughts, so she sighed. Gu Zhe, it is not that I have feelings for you, but it is really impossible for you and Cici. She softly said, Of course, old Lin, and I cannot persuade her to be with you. It is really that you hurt her too deeply. Gu Zhe knew all of this. He pursed his lips and whispered, I understand. Mr. Lin also walked over. After all, he was a man who had been in such a high position, so he was still very open in terms of etiquette. He invited Gu Zhe to have a cup of tea. Gu Zhe was obviously a little flattered, but he quickly nodded. Okay, Dad. Mr. Lin glanced at his wife with an unreadable expression. No matter how dissatisfied Mrs. Lin was, she had to give her husband some face. so they walked back together. She went to make tea, and Guze took the opportunity to look around the villa. Mr. Lin's voice sounded faintly. It can't be compared to the past, but I'm very satisfied that I can still have such a life. However, Cece has been working too hard. A while ago, when Mubai's matter happened, we all asked Cece to come back to a city, but she refused. This was a little different from what Madame Lin had said. Guze looked at Mr. Lin and slowly asked, "Can you tell me, what is going on with the Yi family?" Mr. Lin smiled faintly. Yi Mubai's father has not been doing well recently, and the Bai family can help him to strengthen his position. Under such circumstances, it is normal for Yi Mubai to choose to marry Bai Xueli, and Cece does not blame him. He then added, "Oh, by the way, Cece and Mubai are also good friends." These words were somewhat meaningful, and Guze immediately understood and said in a low voice, "There are many things that I did not do well." Chapter 30, 199. After Mr. Lin said that, Guze quickly understood. He felt an indescribable sadness in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. He just quietly drank the tea that Madame Lin brought over. After drinking the tea, there was no reason for him to stay. They should have been close relatives, but they didn't even have the chance to have a meal together. When Guze got up, Mr. Lin knew what he wanted to say, so he said calmly, "Guze, I know you want to get Cece back, but I want to ask you, if Cece was still that little fool, would you still try so hard to get her?" Guze couldn't answer, and only said in a low voice, "I don't know. I only know that I want to find her now." With that, he walked towards the door. Madame Lin sent him off. Before Guze got into the car, Madame Lin said, "Guze, don't blame Uncle and Auntie. We don't want to see Cece hurt again." Guze nodded solemnly. "I understand and can understand. But I promise I won't hurt her again. If possible, I want to take care of her for the rest of her life." Guze covered his eyes. "I didn't know she could get pregnant." Madame Lin's voice was slightly low. After Chen recovered his memory, he operated on Cece. After Cece had a miscarriage, Chen blamed himself. But this was fate. Guze pursed his lips and sighed. In the end, he didn't say a word. He didn't know where to start. He still got into the car and returned to B City to look for her. He looked at many places, everywhere she could have gone, but he couldn't find her. Later, he heard that she had gone on a trip and didn't know when she would come back. Guze waited in B City, waiting for someone to appear again. Their next meeting was 3 months later. At this time, it was almost New Year, and the weather was very cold. However, Lin Cece came back from some city with a tan. Guze saw her in her villa. At that time, she was moving. It had only been 3 to 4 hours since she set foot in B City. Lin Cece carried the box into the car and looked up at Guze. She looked at Auntie Li. Auntie Li pretended to do something else and turned her head away. Lin Cece smiled and looked at Guze. "Why are you here?" Guze's gaze was deep. He stared at her for a long time before he said in a low voice, "I heard you're back." His gaze shifted to the luggage in her hands. "What are you doing?" "I sold the house and moved." Lin Cece said it easily, but Guze's heart was a little sad. If it weren't for him, perhaps Lin Cece would still be in the entertainment industry, enjoying the best resources that Chen and Mo had given her. He opened his mouth, his voice extremely hoarse. "If the house hadn't been sold, would you have come back?" Lin Cece smiled and continued to take the things that Auntie Li handed over and put them in the car. Guze suddenly grabbed her arm and said in a low voice, "I can buy it and give it to you. Actually, you don't have to move it." Lin Cece's eyes widened as she looked at him in disbelief. Guze was still looking at her. After a long time, she asked softly, "Guze, what is this? Keeping you or compensation?" She flung his hand away and continued to move the things. Guze followed beside her and wanted to help her, but she rejected him. Chapter 30, 200. Auntie Li's expression was complicated. "I only have a small suitcase. I don't have much." Auntie Li felt uneasy. "Cece, why don't I go back to my hometown? You're not in the entertainment industry anymore, and you still have to support me in an ordinary class. I feel bad about it. I can find a job myself when I go out. The main thing was that Cece was about to move to a house that was only 80 square meters. It would be too cramped if she moved in, and it would be inconvenient for Cece to find a boyfriend in the future. Cece thought for a moment. Will you be with your daughter? That's for sure. Auntie Lee nodded. Cece smiled. All right then. She took out a bag from the car and counted out 100,000 yuan for Auntie Lee. This is your salary for the past few months. Auntie Lee was shocked. That won't do. 10,000 is already a lot for me. Besides, you were the one who helped me with that. Cece stuffed the money into her hands. The buyer is a sucker. He paid a few 100,000 more. Take this money. If you want to settle your daughter's lawsuit, it's Mubai's favor. You can treat him to a good meal. Auntie Lee did not say anything else. She carried her small suitcase, and Cece called a taxi for her. Guze watched her as she busied herself. When she was done, he touched his nose. Are you still in contact with Mubai? Occasionally. Cece checked her things and turned to look at Guze. I have to go. Guze stood there without moving. Cece licked her lips and said softly, Do you want to go in and take a look? Everything inside is left according to the rules. Guze looked at her and said slowly, You know I bought it. Why do you still want it? Because I'm short of money. Cece said matter-of-factly and with a carefree tone. Guze put his hand in his pocket and took out a cigarette. Go and take a look. As the previous owner of the house, shouldn't you give an explanation instead of running away? Cece smiled and did not say anything. She went in with him. She told him about the structure of the house and some of the facilities inside. Guze listened indifferently. When she finished, he raised his chin and said, Don't you want to take a look at the top? Cece looked down. You want to see? Of course, I bought the house. I have the right, don't I? He spoke unhurriedly. Cece nodded. All right then. She took him upstairs and showed him every room. Guze looked very carefully, especially her bedroom. He didn't let go of even the slightest clue. Those who knew that he was cleaning up the house, but those who didn't would think that he was catching them in the act. Especially when he checked the pillow and picked up every strand of hair to compare, afraid that he would find evidence of a wild man. At first, Cece didn't think much of it. Later on, she realized something and was a little annoyed. Guze, we don't have a relationship anymore. I'm looking at the house, he said calmly and continued his search. Cece was a little angry. She sat on the sofa and let him search. He could do whatever he wanted. Guze really searched patiently for more than half an hour. He didn't find anything, so his face was like a spring breeze. Are you done? Cece looked at him. Guze nodded. But I still have one question. Cece looked at him. Chapter 3201. Cece was really a little tired, but she still dragged herself up and walked into the bathroom with him. What is the mirror above for? Guze asked, pointing at the mirror embedded in the ceiling above the bathtub. Cece said without thinking, You can look at it when you're bored when you're taking a bath. Guze nodded in agreement. When you're in the same room as a husband and wife, you can look up at it. It's quite good. That's very thoughtful. He suddenly leaned over and whispered in her ear, Cece, have you ever laid in this bathtub with a man? Cece suddenly turned her head and stared at him. After a long time, she whispered, It has nothing to do with you. She thought that Guze would be angry, but she didn't expect that Guze just nodded in agreement. Cece pursed her lips. Do you have any other questions? Guze returned to the master bedroom and looked around. Has everything been moved out? Of course. Cece glanced at him and felt that he was very boring. Guze smiled and walked to the bed. He lifted the mattress and revealed a little doll inside. Cece's face burned, and she reached out to take it. This was her habit. Putting a little toy under the mattress was a habit that she had developed when she was a little fool. Sometimes, she would turn it out on the bed to play with it. After taking a bath, Guzé returned to the bedroom and hugged her together with the toy. He would fold her in his arms and play with her. When she cried hard, he would force her to bite the little toy. Now, these obscure but hot memories were all turned out with this little toy. For a moment, the air was a little warm, but after a while, Lin Cece was silent. She silently took the little thing and lowered her head. "I'll take it with me." Guzé looked at her condescendingly and said softly, "Cece, you don't have to take it with you. You can stay with me, okay?" He went forward and gently hugged her, giving her unprecedented warmth. "Let's be together again." Her small hand was pressed into his arms, and he lowered his head to absorb the warmth of her body. When Guzé hugged her, he suddenly felt that he had been wandering all these years. He used to take care of the little fool because he needed her. She liked him because she liked him, and he needed her because she enriched his spiritual world. It was such a simple logic, yet he had never seen it clearly. Guzé lowered his head and pressed his handsome face against hers. The tip of his nose rubbed against hers gently. It felt like they were kissing. The person in his arms was a little stiff. After a long time, she seemed to come back to her senses and pushed him away. There was a hint of shock and hurt in her eyes. "Mr. Gu, you're thinking too much." Her breathing was a little messy. "I'm just handing over the house to you." Guzé's hand was empty, and he looked a little disappointed. He said softly, "Lin Cece, let's be together again." He wanted to reach out to pull her, but Lin Cece took a step back. She lowered her eyes and said softly, "It's impossible." She looked up and looked into his eyes. "If Mr. Gu is not satisfied with this house, we can terminate the contract." His gaze was deep, and he looked at her for a long time before sighing. "I'm satisfied. How can I not be satisfied?" Chapter 3202. Lin Cece. Guzé stopped her and hugged her from behind. He buried his face in her neck. "Where are you going?" "I rented an apartment," she said softly. "As for the money from selling the villa, I booked 4 apartments in City A for my retirement. Mr. Gu, I have planned for the future, so you really don't have to worry about me." Guzé closed his eyes gently. "Do you promise not to leave City A?"
"No,"
she said in a low voice. "Mr. Gu, don't pester me anymore. Otherwise, I will really leave." She broke away from him, took the doll, and ran out quickly. Guzé loosened his hands and looked at her back. His expression was slightly distorted. There was the sound of a car engine downstairs. He thought she was going to drive away, but the car was still making noise and didn't leave the villa. Guzé stood for a while and walked downstairs slowly. As soon as he went downstairs, he saw Lin Cece getting out of the car and kicking it angrily. He smiled and walked over. "Little fool, the engine is off?" Lin Cece suddenly raised her eyes and stared at him as if she had seen a ghost. Guzé opened the hood. "You are a little fool. You have never seen a car that can be kicked if it's not working. Your foot is hurt." Before he finished speaking, Lin Cece kicked it again. Her toes started to bleed, and she let out a mournful cry. Guzé immediately let go of the hood, walked over and squatted down to let her put one foot on his shoulder. He asked in a low voice, "Does it hurt?" It was winter, and the shoes were thick. He carefully took off her shoes and socks. Lin Cece bit her lips and looked at him blankly. She frowned and said, "It hurts. Be gentle." With that, she wanted to kick him with the other foot. Guzé held her tightly and scolded, "You are so bad-tempered." With that, he carried her back to the hall of the villa and put her on the sofa. "Where is the medicine box?" "In the car," she whispered. Guzé said angrily, "Did you take the medical kit with you? You're the one who said to clean it up." Lin Cece wanted to kick him again. "Hurry up and go. I'm about to die from the pain." Her frowning expression warmed his heart a little. His fingers gently rubbed against her little foot before he walked out to help her get the first aid kit. Lin Cece looked at his back and bit her lip. It was really painful. Guzé returned after a while with a pink medical kit in his hand. However, his expression was the same as usual, not at all out of place. He squatted down and held her little foot again. It was white and soft. He felt a little heartache, but at the same time, He felt lucky to be alone with her for a while. I'll disinfect it first. It might hurt a little. Bear with it. His voice was gentle, as if he was coaxing a child. Lin Cece nodded with tears in her eyes. She looked very pitiful. Guzé lowered his head and carefully cleaned her wound. He rubbed the iodophor on the wound. It was cold and stinging. Lin Cece bit her lip and looked at the wound. She snorted softly. Does it hurt a lot? Guzé looked at her and asked softly. Lin Cece nodded. It hurts a little. Guzé smiled.
Silly.
Don't look at the wound. Just look at my face. It will stop the pain. Chapter 32:03. Guzé smiled. Do you like this kind of change? I don't know. She chose to say this. Guzé thought for a while and understood what she meant. She said it very tactfully, and her real meaning was probably that it had nothing to do with her. He didn't say anything else and just applied medicine for her. The two of them didn't speak again. After the medicine was applied, Lin Cece wanted to try to walk, but Guzé held her down. I'll give you a ride. She looked up and wanted to refuse. He looked into her eyes and said softly, It's been so long. Shouldn't I give you a ride? After a pause, he said again, Your car is broken. When it's fixed, I'll ask someone to drive it for you. Lin Cece thought about it and agreed. She acted like she was about to get up. Guzé smiled faintly. Sit down. I'm a little hungry. I'll eat a bowl of noodles before I leave. Do you want some? Lin Cece was a little dazed and said softly, Guzé, just a bowl of noodles. There was a hint of coaxing in his voice. Lin Cece didn't want to argue with him. She had a feeling that if they argued too much, it wouldn't just be words. If she angered him, he might suffer. So she let him go while she sat on the sofa and picked up a magazine to read. Guzé walked into the kitchen. About 2 minutes later, he poked his head out. Cece, can the ingredients in the fridge be used? Lin Cece was stunned. Oh, I don't know. She was afraid that he would poison her, so she hopped over. Her embarrassed look made Guzé smile, but he still stood there waiting for her to pass. He opened the fridge again. Are these usable? Lin Cece looked at it randomly and then looked at him with a blank face. I'll ask Auntie Lee. She wanted to make a phone call, but Guzé stopped her. Forget it. Throw them all away. I'll go buy something fresh. Lin Cece objected. Just order takeout. She felt like a dog in her heart. Why did she have to discuss this with Guzé here? Shouldn't they just get along with each other and walk away in peace? But they just stood there and discussed what to eat for lunch like an ordinary couple. After she said that, Guzé crossed his arms in front of him and said disapprovingly, Takeout is all gutter oil. He had already made his decision. I'll also add some ingredients for your new home. Lin Cece, do you know how to cook? I won't, Lin Cece answered simply. Guzé smiled. If you don't know, then you'll have to learn. After saying that, he wanted to carry her into the car. Lin Cece took a step back and said, I'll stay here. You can go alone. Don't buy too much. I really don't know how to cook, and I don't intend to learn. Guzé stepped forward and picked her up. I'm worried about leaving you here alone. I'm not a child anymore. Lin Cece pursed her lips and didn't want to go out with him. She even jumped to the sofa and sat down. Guzé followed her, bent down, and put his hands on the armrests. What if something unexpected happens? Anyway, I'm worried. He reached out and picked her up, not allowing her to refuse. Lin Cece was a little anxious. She clenched her fists and hit his shoulder hard. Guzé, you can't do this. We're no longer related. We've already divorced, and our household registration has been moved. As she said that, her nose turned sour. The child is gone. Let go of me. Chapter 32:04. Lin Cece, who had been patting his shoulder, slowed down and stopped. Then she looked at him while holding her breath, as if she wasn't sure what she had heard. Guzé smiled bitterly. Cece, let's start over, okay?
No.
Her voice was calm, and so were her eyes. Guze's heart ached, but he still said gently, "It doesn't matter if it's not good. I'll wait for you." He still took her to the car, put her down carefully, and took a tissue to wipe her tears. Lin Cece sat and looked down. "Guze, you know how to coax girls. I thought you didn't." Guze's voice was also soft. "I used to coax you before. When you were a little fool, I always coaxed you to sleep." Before he could finish, Lin Cece interrupted him. "Don't say another word." Guze gave her a very warm smile and started the car again. Lin Cece refused to talk to him anymore. She was forced to go with him now. When she got the money and her foot recovered, she wouldn't care about him anymore. Guze didn't drive fast, and it took about half an hour to reach the supermarket. When they arrived, Lin Cece refused to get out of the car. "I'll wait in the car. Let's go down together. You can choose what you want to eat." He unfastened the seatbelt and looked at her. "If you don't want to eat, I can help you." Lin Cece glared at him. "Guze, why didn't I know you were so shameless before? In the past, beauty lies in the eyes of a beautiful person. You saw that everything about me was good, but now you see that everything about you Mubai is good, right?" Guze's tone carried a hint of a cold smile, and he looked very unhappy. Lin Cece snorted. "Guze, you're so boring." He suddenly approached her and said in a low voice, "If I appear in front of you every day, will you find me annoying?" She sat still, afraid that his hot lips would touch her. Guze looked at her and smiled. Then he sat up straight again. "Whether you hate me or hate me, I will appear." He opened the car door and got out. Then he walked over to her side and carried her down. He placed her in his arms and carried her horizontally, not afraid of other people's gazes. Lin Cece was stunned for a moment, then she reached out and hit him. "Guze, you're crazy. Others will see it. Then we'll see." He was still unmoved and carried her straight toward the elevator. Lin Cece froze for a moment and bit her lip. "Aren't you afraid that the reporters will take photos and write nonsense?" She then added, "You have a fiancé. If you don't like it, I can break off the engagement anytime." He lowered his head and gave her a warm smile. "But don't you think it's better to steal glances?" Lin Cece was so angry that she punched him again. Guze smiled happily, sweeping away the gloom of the past few days. In the end, he simply caught her little fist and warned her in a low voice, "If you hit me again, I'll kiss you." Lin Cece glared at him. Guze smiled. "You don't believe me." She suddenly retracted her hand and glared at him fiercely. Guze smiled happily again and said nothing. Then, he looked at the shopping cart and directly dragged one over to put her in it. "Although I always want to hold you, you're too heavy." Lin Cece couldn't do anything about him. The current Guze was simply a rascal. She glared at him. Chapter 32:05. Lin Cece glared at him. Guze said seriously, "I'm courting you, Lin Cece. Don't tell me you can't feel it?" She smiled faintly. "Then I refuse, can I?" Guze didn't say anything. He just pushed her and avoided the crowd as they walked into the supermarket. As more and more people gathered, she felt uneasy. "Guze, at least wear sunglasses." "Why do I need to wear sunglasses?" He thought for a moment and understood. "You had to pretend when you were a star, but Lin Cece, you're not a star anymore, so you don't need it anymore." He said slowly, "And you're not the girlfriend of some best actor. It's normal for us to be together." Lin Cece bit her lips. "Mr. Gu, don't forget that you have a fiancé. I don't want to be tied to you anymore." He smiled and pushed her into the supermarket. As he picked out the ingredients, he said casually, "You're so concerned about my engagement with Wenwan." His voice deepened. "If you really mind, I can cancel at any time." Lin Cece didn't have such thoughts, but she was a little angry at Guze's attitude. What right did he have to be so righteous? So she sneered. "Tell her now." Guze's lips curled up. "Really?" Lin Cece didn't reply. She lowered her eyes, took 2 bottles of milk from the shelf and threw them into the shopping basket. Her tantrum made Guze laugh. He pushed her and even bent over to tease her. "Oh yeah, you haven't done anything with anyone since you left me, right?" Lin Cece knew what he was talking about. She sneered. Of course I have. It's normal to have unspoken rules in the industry. I haven't, he said suddenly. Lin Cece was stunned. What was he talking about? Didn't he know that it was childish? Yes, it was childish. Guze said again, but I don't think any man can stand your temper. Of course, except for Old Bai. But when something happened to Old Bai's family, Bai Shuali's family could help, so he had to compromise. Lin Cece's face darkened. She believed him when he said that he hadn't been courting a woman for a long time. He really said whatever she hated to hear. Lin Cece's face darkened, and Guze asked with ill intentions, Lin Cece, why can you forgive Lao Bai, but not me? Is it because you slept with me but not Lao Bai? Lin Cece's face darkened even more. She couldn't be bothered with him. As a straight man, Guze felt that he had hit the nail on the head. Of course, her face was already very ugly, so he did not provoke her again and focused on picking the ingredients. He had been picking for a full hour. Originally, Lin Cece was not very hungry, but now he was really a little hungry. But she didn't make a sound and followed him to pay the bill. At the checkout counter, Guze had already taken out his wallet to pay. Suddenly, he took out 2 large boxes of family planning products from the shelf in front of the cashier counter. Lin Cece stared at it blankly. You use it? Guze smiled. Could it be that you're the one using it? Lin Cece glared at him, but the lady at the cashier couldn't stand it anymore. She looked at Lin Cece's feet and said, Sir, your girlfriend is already like this. You have to pay attention to your posture. Guze asked with great interest, Do you have any good suggestions? The cashier coughed lightly. Just don't sit down there, young lady. Guze nodded understandingly. We will be careful. With that said, he paid the bill with a calm expression. After taking the things, he pushed Lin Cece. She whispered, Push faster. I don't want to embarrass myself with you. Chapter 3206. Guze laughed in a low voice. He looked at Lin Cece and said, Is this very embarrassing? Didn't you always pester me to do it before? Lin Cece glared at him and said, Guze, can you please be more shameless?
No.
He suddenly smiled helplessly. Lin Cece, it's not good at all. Because if he wanted to be shameless, she would have run away long ago. His sudden sadness made the atmosphere between them very gloomy. When they arrived at the parking lot, he put the things in the trunk and carried her into the car. When he got into the car, he slowly buckled his seatbelt and looked ahead. He said, Lin Cece, I still have more than 20 million yuan to pay for the house. Be my wife for a month, and I'll transfer 100 million yuan to your card. He then turned to look at her and said seriously, It's the kind where we have to make love, for real. He had already bought the t-shirt. He thought she would slap him, but Lin Cece didn't. She seemed to be thinking about it seriously. About 2 minutes later, she smiled and said, Okay. It's much easier to make 80 million a month than I do in the entertainment industry. Guze's gaze fell on her face. He smiled and then started the car. They didn't talk until they reached the parking lot of the villa. Guze unbuckled his seatbelt. Lin Cece thought he would carry her out of the car, but she didn't expect him to carry her to the bedroom on the 2nd floor. Her body was pressed against the soft bed, and he kissed her deeply, his hand almost savagely ripping off her clothes.
Guze.
Lin Cece pressed her head against the pillow and whispered his name. I don't want. We agreed to make love. He panted, and the sparks in his eyes were even more frightening. I'm a businessman. Lin Cece, do you think I'll make a loss? He was too rude and barbaric. Seeing that she was crying, Guze kissed her little face and said in a hoarse voice, I'll be gentle. When it was over, Lin Cece lay on the bed. Her whole body was sore, but she didn't care about herself. She just stared at the ceiling. Guze's lust had been vented, and he was in a much better mood. He licked her lips and said, I'll take you to the bathroom to take a shower, okay? Lin Cece looked at him and shook her head. I'm a little tired. You go and cook. With that, she patted his arm and closed her eyes. She won Guze's heart by behaving this way. When he forced himself on her, he thought that she would be angry and refuse. After all, they really broke up because they lost their child. He didn't expect that she would be willing to start again with him. He was indescribably satisfied. He kissed her face and said, "Okay, I'll make it. I'll make your favorite pork ribs, okay?" Guze didn't know about other men, but after not having sex for a long time, he suddenly felt especially happy after eating meat. He went downstairs and saw that it was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Only then did he realize that he had been pressing her for several hours. No wonder she cried out in pain and refused to let him touch her again. He was in a good mood, so he made 4 dishes and a soup. After that, he slowly went upstairs to call her for dinner. Lin Cece fell asleep.
She was in a deep sleep.
Guze reached out and touched her face gently. He called her, but she hugged the pillow and refused to get up. Chapter 30, 207. He was seduced by the leg that she stretched out. He stopped calling her and lay down beside her, kissing her lips again and again until he lifted her up. Lin Cece opened her eyes. Feeling his presence, she gave him a light slap on the face. "Why haven't you had enough?" With that said, she closed her eyes, feeling weak all over. Guze played with her bit by bit, placing his finger by her mouth for her to gently bite. They had never been so intimate before. This time, he was even more excited than before and did not let her go. By the time it was over, it was already dark. He carried her to the bathroom. Originally, he wanted to let her go, but he could not help it. Gently holding her against the wall, he could not help but do it again. By the time Lin Cece had dinner, it was already 8 p.m. She sat in the living room and ate with Guze. Her little face was stiff and unhappy. Guze did not mind it, knowing that she was angry. The little girl was sore and in pain after he did it so many times. Thinking about it, she was pitiful. After she finished eating, he carried her to the bed and opened the bathrobe to check her. Lin Cece misunderstood him. She closed her legs and sighed. "No matter how much you want it, I don't have the strength to accompany you." Guze looked at her with a burning gaze. Licking his lips, he said in a low voice, "Cece, let me see if you're hurt." That place had endured him for so long. No matter how scrupulous he was, it was impossible to say that it was not hurt at all. And she was so delicate. Guze leaned over her and whispered in her ear, "After we separated, you didn't have anyone else, did you?" He was a man, and he had tasted her so carefully today. He would not be oblivious. Lin Cece glared at him and bit her lips. "It has nothing to do with you." Guze smiled and did not force her to say it. Instead, he got up to get an ointment. He squatted in front of her. Lin Cece was a little shy and did not want him to apply it. "Don't move. If you move, I won't be able to control myself." He chuckled and gently applied the medicine for her. Lin Cece lay there, feeling the tenderness of his fingertips. She looked at the light on the ceiling and suddenly burst into tears. In the past, she had longed for a person's love and gentleness, but now that she had it, she didn't feel anything. Guze looked up and saw that she was crying. He was stunned for a moment. "Why are you crying? Did I hurt you?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't." Guze twisted out the medicine and gently placed it on the bedside. Then, he slowly lay down and hugged her. He buried his face in her neck and said very softly, "Lin Cece, I'm sorry." His fingers slowly caressed her face. "Let's do it all over again. This time I'll cherish you." She didn't say yes and continued to cry quietly. When she cried, he couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't help but kiss away her tears. As he kissed her lips, then her body. In the end, he couldn't help but want her again. Guze felt that this kind of life was too wonderful. The feeling of having Lin Cece by his side was too wonderful. He had even planned that after she recovered in 6 months, they would have a child. Before that, they would hold a wedding first. This time, he would give her a wedding that women all over the world would envy. So when Guze went to work, He asked Su Qiaonan to bring a thick stack of magazines over, and he flipped through them one by one. Chapter 32:08. Guze had thought that only women would be interested in this kind of thing, but it turned out that men were exactly the same as women when they looked forward to it. Su Qiaonan was surprised to see Guze like this. She couldn't help asking, "Mr. Gu, are you going to marry Miss Wen Xine?" Her surprise wasn't without reason. Guze didn't have any feelings for Wenwan, and the fact that the engagement wasn't cancelled was just a small matter. Unexpectedly, her question reminded Guze of something. He was engaged to Wen Xine. Therefore, if he and Lin Cece were to be together, he had to get rid of Wen Xine first, and he had to do it beautifully so that Lin Cece wouldn't be criticized. He thought for a moment and said, "I'm getting married, but it's not Wen Xine. It's Lin Cece." Su Qiaonan was shocked. She hadn't expected Guze to be with Lin Cece again. Hadn't they broken up? However, as a secretary, she obviously couldn't question him, so she asked carefully, "Is this Mr. Gu's idea or Lin Cece's?" Guze continued reading the magazine and said, "Cece doesn't know what I mean yet." He looked at Su Qiaonan and said, "Don't talk too much." Su Qiaonan said yes, and then pursed her lips. She didn't leave because she knew that Guze had something to tell her. Sure enough, Guze said, "Arrange a press conference for me." Su Qiaonan's voice was trembling. "Mr. Gu, I want to break off the engagement with Wen Xine. Otherwise, how can I get married? Cece won't be happy either." Guze glanced at her and saw that she didn't move.
Why?
Is it difficult? Su Qiaonan's face was pale. "Miss Wen didn't do anything wrong. It's her fault that I don't love her." Guze said impatiently, "Secretary Su, if you think you can't handle this matter, I'll let someone else take over your position." Su Qiaonan nodded awkwardly. "I understand, Mr. Gu." She went out to arrange these things, but she called Wen Xine immediately so that she could be prepared. That afternoon, a piece of big news broke out in H City. Miss Wenwan, the second shareholder of Hungtong Group, announced that she was pregnant. She was Guze's fiancée, so there was no need to ask who the child belonged to. Watching the news, Guze threw down the remote control in his hand expressionlessly and pressed the intercom. "Call Su Qiaonan in." Su Qiaonan came in 5 minutes later, and he didn't look too good. Guze stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The light behind him enveloped his entire body, making his face appear even colder. He said coldly, "Secretary Su, from now on you're fired. There's no need to ask me why." She revealed his whereabouts, allowing Wen Xine to be prepared. Announce pregnancy. What a good move. However, Guze had never seen Wenwan before. How could he get her pregnant? You can get pregnant just by looking? Su Qiaonan was still standing upright. "Lin Cece is not worthy of you." Her overstep finally attracted Guze's attention. He said coldly, "Then who is worthy of her? Secretary Su, is it you?" Su Qiaonan's face turned even paler. She smiled sadly. "I never dare to think about it, but compared to Lin Cece's unbearable past, I'd rather you marry Wen Xine. At least she really loves you." Guze almost lost his composure. "You're crazy."
Get lost.
"You'd better be clean in the company, or I'll send you to jail," Guze said coldly. He then called the security guards and personally watched Su Qiaonan pack up her things and leave. After doing all this, he calmed down and began to feel a little scared. He didn't know how to explain it to Lin Cece. Chapter 32:09. Guze sat in his office for about half an hour before he called Wen Xine. Wen Xine picked up the phone quickly.
Guze went straight to the point.
"What do you want? Do you want to get your father out of jail?" Wen Xine smiled and said, "The child in my stomach isn't that famous. I don't dare to hope for it." "Since you know it's impossible, why did you lie to the media?" "It won't do you any good, Wen Xine." Guze's voice was gloomy.
You can still make up for it now.
"Why should I make up for it?" Wen Xine's voice was a little harsh. "Guze, have you ever thought that there's a possibility that I still like you?" Gu Zhe chuckled. Like me? You were the one who exposed my marriage to Lin Cece, weren't you? You were also the one who found someone to film the movie where Cece and Lan Yu and Qin Chen went out to watch a movie, right? When Xian, have you forgotten about all these things? When Xian was silent for a long time before she said in a low voice, you were the one who gave up on her that time. You were already engaged to me, so you shouldn't have provoked her. I shouldn't have provoked her, but I did. Gu Zhe's tone was calm. If you think that announcing your pregnancy can stop anything, then you're too naive. Your stomach is empty. Now you have to think of a way to have a child, right? When Xian froze. You'd better pray that the man you found is useful. Gu Zhe sneered and hung up. Then he called the public relations department. Arrange a press conference. The public relations department was also trembling as they waited for instructions. Secretary Su had been fired just now. President Gu's matter had blown up. When Xian had set President Gu up, everyone in Hengtong knew that President Gu and her were just a couple in name only. It was rare for them to be in the same frame, let alone have a child. The manager of the public relations department looked serious. President Gu, what instructions do you have? Just invite the reporters over. Gu Zhe's tone was calm as he hung up. An hour later, the press conference was held on time. When Xian actually came as well. She was holding the pregnancy test report for 1 month. She looked very confident, as if she was going to marry into the Gu family. Gu Zhe sat on the stage and ignored her. When Nuan was surrounded by reporters and with a blissful expression, she introduced the things that one needed to pay attention to during pregnancy, then walked in front of Gu Zhe. Congratulations, Miss Wen. Gu Zhe said expressionlessly. When Nuan smiled lightly and lowered her voice, Gu Zhe, did you call me over to announce our marriage? This is the right choice. After she finished speaking, Gu Zhe sneered. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. I want to break off the engagement. When Xian didn't believe him, she chuckled. Gu Zhe, I'm pregnant. If you break off the engagement and want to be with Lin Cece, do you know how big of an impact it will have? I know. Gu Zhe's voice was a little low. But I feel disgusted being with a scheming woman like you, for even a second. When Nuan's expression suddenly changed, Gu Zhe smiled faintly, looked at the people below, and said to the staff beside him, you can start now. The staff announced the start of the press conference in a very simple and rude manner. The reporters began to ask questions crazily, most of them related to Nuan's stomach. Nuan already knew what was going to happen, so her smile was very forced. Chapter 32:10. Tang Yao didn't answer the reporters' questions. He just listened to them and gave Xian his sincere blessings and greeted the child's father. The reporters were in an uproar. Xian was President Gu's fiancé. What did she mean by greeting the child's father? However, the reporters loved to write about the secrets of the rich and powerful. This turn of events was too explosive, but they liked it. Xian's face kept trembling and she said in a sharp voice, Gu Zhe, are you going to insist that the child is mine? Gu Zhe gave her one last chance and said in a low voice, as long as you say that you're not pregnant, there won't be any misunderstandings. After he said that, he smiled charmingly. That smile was terrifying in Xian's eyes. She knew that she should say what he said to minimize the loss, but she was unwilling to do so. If she didn't bite him, their engagement would be cancelled. Gu Zhe was crazy. He was crazy to want to be with Lin Cece. Gu Zhe was crazy, but she wasn't. She couldn't let this happen again. Xian gritted her teeth. I have some misunderstandings with Gu Zhe. My child is Gu Zhe's. The crowd was in an uproar again. Gu Zhe's gaze fell on Xian's face. He smiled and adjusted the microphone. I don't want to explain. Nothing happened between Miss Xian and I after being engaged for so long. There's no way to verify this, but I can prove that this child isn't mine. He nodded behind him. A notary immediately came forward and took out a medical report from his briefcase. This is a medical report. Mr. Gu Zhe had already undergone a vasectomy at a certain hospital 40 days ago, so it's impossible for him to get a lady pregnant. The notary's voice was rigid, but his words were very fair and trustworthy. Moreover, the medical report and the chief surgeon were all here. When Xin couldn't sit still anymore, her face turned pale. She didn't believe that he would undergo a vasectomy. Why would he do it? She immediately thought of Lin Cici's miscarriage. Su Qiaonan said that it was Gu Zhe's child. She didn't believe him, but she could do it now. Gu Zhe's vasectomy was to prevent Lin Cici from getting pregnant, but he actually did it. How much did he love Lin Cici for him to do that? Wenwan's face was covered in tears. She continued to watch Gu Zhe put on an act and said in a gentle tone, "Miss Wenwan and I will make peace." Of course, Miss Wenwan's reputation might be damaged, but I believe that the child's father will take responsibility. Wenwan raised her head. "You're doing it for Lin Cici, right? Her child is yours, isn't it?" The reporters did not expect that when Xin would bring the topic to Lin Cici, but they liked this topic. The cameras and microphones were once again aimed at Gu Zhe. Gu Zhe smiled slightly. "From the beginning to the end, Lin Cici and I have always been together. We have never been separated, so I want to apologize to Miss Wenwan. Our engagement has caused you trouble." He paused for a moment before saying, "As for Lin Cici's child, it's mine. She and Yimu Bai are just doing it for the sake of popularity. I believe everyone can understand." He said sincerely, "Because I couldn't help but get Lin Cici pregnant and accidentally miscarried, I felt very guilty, so I went for a vasectomy. Here, I want to say to her, Cici, we will still have children." Chapter 30-11. The female reporters present screamed, "Oh my God!" They couldn't help themselves. "Oh my God!" President Gu was too manly. They were clearly a divorced couple, and they were clearly fighting with Wenwan in the open and in the dark. Why did they feel like she was giving them candy, and it was sweet? Especially when President Gu was both rich and handsome. Wow. Give us a dozen of such President Gu. The female reporter asked frantically, "President Gu, will you marry Miss Lin Cici?" Gu Zhe smiled. "As long as she is willing." There was another scream. "President Gu, do you love Miss Lin Cici very much? Why do you love her?" "As far as we know, she is not particularly outstanding." There were also very sharp female reporters who asked questions. "Also, if you love her very much, why did you abandon her a few years ago? Why did you choose Miss Wenwan?" Gu Zhe's eyes were filled with affection. "Cici is very beautiful. She is my type. As for whether she is outstanding or not, it is definitely not the standard for a man to choose a wife." The female reporter laughed. "Then President Gu's standard is to be beautiful?"
You can say that.
Gu Zhe smiled.
But it needs to be the type I like.
"I don't like all good-looking women." Wenwan was unjustly implicated. Her expression was very ugly, but no one cared about her thoughts. Everyone's attention was on Lin Cici. No one remembered that Wenwan was pregnant. As for Gu Zhe, he also took the opportunity to confess. The press conference was broadcast live on a certain station in City B. Before the broadcast, Lin Cici's phone was exploding with calls. The person who called was none other than the boss of a certain station, the board president Qin Mo. So Lin Cici had been watching the news from the beginning to the end. When Gu Zhe took out the ligation form, Lin Cici ran back to the bedroom and took out 2 big boxes. These were the tea that Gu Zhe had bought. He had used it seriously when they had sex.
Fuck.
Damn it. It was clearly a ligation, but he still used this thing. He was too despicable. Lin Cici bit her lip and threw the things aside. She hugged the pillow and began to watch the interview. She had acted before, so she knew what was real and what was fake. She could tell. Gu Zhe was serious. When he said that he wanted to marry her, it was also true. Lin Cici slowly put down the pillow in her hands, her face slowly turning cold. When he said that they would be husband and wife for a month, she did it for 80 million yuan. But now he said he wanted to marry her, and she didn't want to. She stared at the screen, unable to hear what was being said. She only knew that all the chaotic sounds were rushing towards her. Lin Cece sat there until Gu Zhe returned. He had come back with dinner. Seeing her sitting on the sofa in a daze, he smiled and said in a low voice, "I told you that you wouldn't eat well at home alone. I brought some food back. After eating, let's go for a walk together." Lin Cece looked down at the two big bento boxes in front of her and said softly, "My feet still hurt a little, so I bought a wheelchair. I'll push you." He smiled at her. "Then it won't hurt anymore." Lin Cece raised her eyes and looked at him. Suddenly, she picked up two boxes of tanks and threw them at him. "Gu Zhe, get lost." The tea inside fell out one after another and landed on the sofa. Lin Cece's mouth kept moving up and down as she glared at him angrily. Chapter 32:12. Lin Cece bit her lip. "I've never seen anyone more shameless than you." Gu Zhe smiled and reached out to touch her hair. "I'm only shameless to you." Lin Cece still stared at him, feeling disillusioned. Although she didn't want to be with him anymore, Gu Zhe wasn't like this in the past. Gu Zhe smiled. "Let me show you something." She didn't say anything. He took off his coat and wore a beige sweater. The sweater was knitted, and the workmanship was rough. It was something that Lin Cece was familiar with. It was the sweater that she had knitted for him when she was a little fool. He was wearing it now. Gu Zhe looked at the tears in her eyes and said softly, "Don't cry. I know the confession was too sudden. I wanted to take it slow, but when Nuan was like that, I couldn't do anything about it." He hugged her and said softly, "I've never been with her, not even once. I haven't touched her, huh?" Lin Cece listened to what he said with a blank expression. After a while, she said in a low voice, "That's not the point." Gu Zhe actually knew what she wanted to say. He smiled and said, "Let's eat first. We can talk about it slowly. Cece, we have a lifetime." She still looked at him in a daze. "Gu Zhe, did you say a lifetime?" Gu Zhe nodded. "Yes, a lifetime." Lin Cece wiped her tears and said softly, "Gu Zhe, if you want to break up, then break up. If you say a lifetime, then a lifetime. Do you think that I have to be with you just because you said you love me in front of the reporters?" Gu Zhe felt a stab of pain in his heart. He hugged her and coaxed her carefully. "I know it's my fault. You can choose not to agree, but don't show up at my proposal or our wedding and stand me up to vent your anger, okay?" Lin Cece looked at him for a long time before she came back to her senses. She squeezed out a sentence. "Gu Zhe, you're crazy." Gu Zhe chuckled and replied, "Perhaps." As he spoke, he reached out to prepare the lunchbox and took care of her while she ate, just like an ordinary married couple. Lin Cece was hungry, so she didn't refuse again. After eating, she said in a low voice, "I won't agree. 1 month, I only want 1 month." Gu Zhe looked at her and sighed. "You can be more straightforward and say that you only want the 80 million. She looked up and put on a fake smile. "That's right. I only want 80 million yuan. Don't." Before she could finish speaking, her body was embraced by him. He buried his face in her neck and said in a low voice, "Cece, don't say it. Even if it's what you think, don't say it." Lin Cece was held in his arms and could not move. After a long time, she whispered, "Can you change the sweater? At least wash it before wearing it. It smells like dirt." Her face was filled with disdain.
Gu Zhe laughed.
"You knitted it yourself, Lin Cece. How dare you despise it now?" Lin Cece stuck out her tongue. "That's because you're stupid to wear it. It's obvious that it's terrible. You've become a lab rat, and you're still so happy wearing it." As she said that, he looked at her with an indulgent smile on his face. Chapter 32:13. He looked at her for a long time and said, "Not good." When her expression changed slightly, he smiled again. "Whatever you say." With that, he picked her up and put her in a new wheelchair. He pushed her out for a walk. Lin Cece, let him be. The two of them were like an old couple under the setting sun. Gu Zhe treated her very well, unexpectedly well. He was so good that she almost believed that they really loved each other and that the hurt had never happened. Lin Cece asked him to stop. She looked at the clouds in the sky and smiled. Guze, don't you think those clouds are very strange? They look like this one, and then like that one. Guze also smiled. They are what you think of in your heart. Lin Cece looked at it with him. After a while, she suddenly said, Guze, I want to go to Sea City. Sea City? Guze was a little surprised. Because although there were their best memories there was also their deepest pain. Did she really want to go there? Lin Cece nodded. I want to go. Guze hugged her. Okay, let's go tonight. Lin Cece hugged his arm and said in a soft voice, Guze, can I be your little fool again? His body trembled, and then he smiled. That night was wonderful. Lin Cece arrived in Sea City at 8:00 in the evening. She took a helicopter, which was driven by Guze. When she arrived in Sea City, there was an even bigger surprise waiting for her. Auntie Lee was there. If it weren't for her foot injury, Lin Cece would have already rushed over. The moment Guze carried her down, the fountain in the entire villa turned on, and the music fountain also began to sing happily. It was the sound that she hadn't heard for a long time. She had filmed a commercial with Yimu Bai here, but now she was in a completely different mood. Perhaps she still had some regrets in her heart, but she could make up for those regretful dreams. She reached out her hand and felt the cold water in her palm, then smiled slightly. Guze put her down. Let's take a walk and see if your foot still hurts. Lin Cece supported him and stood for a while. Then she raised her voice and said, Guze, can you take a photo for me? He smiled, took the phone, and took a photo with her in front of the fountain. Her little face was a little unwilling, but his face was full of happiness. After taking the photo, Guze didn't let go of her. Instead, he held her long black hair and said in a low voice, Cece, can we live here in the future? She smiled cutely, as if she had returned to the little fool of the past. She looked very cute, as if she had gone back to the little fool of the past. He reached out to straighten her hair and said in a low voice, moving the company's headquarters to Sea City is enough. Can your parents move here too? If you like, you can live together. Lin Cece was stunned for a moment, and then looked at him. Is this a proposal? Forget it. He smiled. Then do you agree? Lin Cece's gaze fell on his face. After a long time, she said in a low voice, Guze, if nothing had happened to the Yi family, if old Bai hadn't married Bai Xueli, I would have married him. Her simple words made his face change. Guze wasn't stupid. He knew what she meant. Chapter 32:14. Guze's voice was a little tense. Things between you and old Bai are over. Lin Cece looked at him seriously. Guze, in fact, things between us are over a long time ago. Why are you so persistent? Every word she said now was a rejection, and Guze's heart ached. Did she not care about him anymore? Did she think that he was invulnerable, or did she think that their relationship was only worth 80 million?
Guze did not say anything.
He pursed his lips tightly, and it was obvious that he was unhappy. Lin Cece smiled and walked towards the main house. Didn't we agree on a month? Shouldn't we be happier? She suddenly turned around and opened her arms to him. Her voice was sweet and soft. Guze, hug me. He was stunned for a moment, and then he quickly walked toward her. At this moment, he was like a patient, and Cece was his medicine. Only by eating her would he be cured. He picked her up, and Lin Cece immediately put her arms around his neck. She said in a sweet voice, Guze, I want to eat skewers. But he bent down and put his thin lips on her ear. I want to eat you. She screamed and curled up in his arms. She always knew what he liked. He liked nothing more than a little fool. In the night, he kissed her until her body turned soft. He looked around and saw that she really couldn't walk through the hall like this. Auntie Lee, who had been at the entrance just now, was now gone. She probably saw them kissing indiscriminately. Guze thought for a moment, took off his coat and wrapped it around her and walked quickly towards the main house. There was no one in the big hall, so he simply tore off her clothes while kissing her. They went back and forth, and when they reached the master bedroom upstairs, she was almost clean. Her body was thrown up, and she knelt by the bed. Her long black hair was scattered behind her shoulders, and she was very beautiful. Guzé lowered his head and held her chin to kiss her. At this moment, he thought of something and asked jealously, "Has old Bai kissed you?" She hugged his neck and kissed him. "I did." Guzé gasped and leaned forward to block her. "Did he beat you?" Lin Cece chose to answer honestly, "Yes, but not below." Guzé immediately let go of her and took 2 steps back. Lin Cece yawned lazily. "Are you going to bring up the past with me? Guzé, tell me you haven't touched any of those little stars and models?"
He did.
To spite her and to forget her, he had slept with someone else. And it wasn't just one woman. Guzé's chest heaved violently. "Are you interrogating me now?" She moved closer again, her little hand gently stroking his chest. "You said that I'm your wife this month, so you're mine?" She was pure and sexy. She was much more interesting than when she was a little fool. Guzé went forward and kissed her again, almost fascinated. This time, there were no superfluous words, and the kiss had to be thorough. In the heat of passion, Lin Cece couldn't take it anymore. She scratched his back with her fingernails and said, pitifully, "Didn't you have a woman before? Why does it feel like you haven't had sex for a few years?" Guzé pressed her down and coaxed her as he came. Chapter 32:15. They went back and forth a few times until late at night. Guzé thought that Lin Cece would be exhausted, but she insisted on eating skewers after the shower. Guzé kissed and caressed her. "Can we go tomorrow? Your leg hurts again after so many times today." His little fool endured his kiss as she hugged him coquettishly. "I just want to eat skewers." "Do you really want to eat it?" he whispered into her ear. His voice was intriguing. Lin Cece glared at him and said, "Guzé, you're so naughty. I'll take you out to eat after you eat, okay?" He coaxed her in a low voice. He didn't have such an idea at first, but at this moment, he wanted to do it. He wanted to bully her like this. Lin Cece's eyes widened. Guzé patted her head and said, "Be good." Then, she obediently lay down on the bed. Half an hour later, Guzé walked out of the bathroom in a good mood, followed by Lin Cece. He put on her coat and smiled. "Do you want me to hold you?" Lin Cece looked at him and said, "No need." She almost vomited blood. Her mouth was full of the taste of skewers. Guzé's skewers. Guzé was smiling all the way to the car. He pinched her soft face and said, "You agreed just now. Why are you unhappy now?" Lin Cece gritted her teeth and said, "You didn't say it would take so long just now. That's because you eat slowly." He laughed and naughtily put the blame on her. "Next time, you should finish eating faster." Lin Cece couldn't listen to it anymore. She covered her ears and didn't want to listen anymore. Before Guzé started the car, he couldn't help but kiss her face and said, "Cece, you're so cute." Lin Cece shrugged and let him kiss her. She rolled her eyes at him. "You only know how to bully me." She looked so cute that Guzé almost didn't want to drive. He just wanted to take the little guy back to the master bedroom upstairs and love him as much as he wanted. However, he still restrained himself and reached out to caress her little face. "I'll try not to bully you outside of the bedroom." She glared at him again. Guzé felt that this was the best thing that could happen to him. It was as if he had such an imperfect but satisfying relationship in his life. He had no regrets. He started the car and went to the barbecue restaurant that Yi Mubai and her crew went to. He was a little proud and wanted to get back at them. That time here, she kissed White. So when he went over, he hugged her and kissed her fiercely a few times to regain his dignity. Lin Cece couldn't stand him anymore and complained, "Guzé, you're so childish." "I am childish." He smiled and lowered his head to order his food. Then, he said lightly, "Fortunately, Yi Mubai and Bai Xueli are married. Otherwise, I would have to go through more trouble." Kidnapping the bride? Lin Cece held her cheeks and looked at him with a smile. Guze looked up at her for a while, and his eyes were full of smiles. He said very slowly, "It's unlikely that she would kidnap the bride. I guess she will have a secret affair with you." He asked in all seriousness, "Are you willing?" Chapter 30, 216. Guze's expression was a little complicated as he looked at her. Then, "Are you in love with him?" Lin Cece lay down and looked at him. She said slowly, "Just a little more."
Guze knew that she liked Lao Bai.
It was just that she didn't have the chance or time to get to that stage. However, he could also guess that Lao Bai hadn't touched her. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so indifferent when she mentioned him.
He didn't reply.
Men were always petty in this aspect. He didn't want to keep mentioning Lao Bai and remind her of him. At that moment, the boss served the skewers. When he saw Lin Cece, he remembered that she was a girl from a few months ago. However, the man she was with last time wasn't this one. It was another very handsome man. Of course, this one was also very handsome. The boss took a second look. Guze glared at him, and the boss immediately ran away. "Guze, you're so fierce." Lin Cece tugged at him. "Don't be like that." Guze was about to say something when Lin Cece stared at the rabbit heads on the plate. "Oh my god, they're eating rabbits. That's too cruel." Lin Cece glared at Guze. Guze was a little helpless. "You don't like it." "I like it." Lin Cece grabbed one and ate it with relish. "It's just that there's too little. You can order a few more." Guze. After a pause, he came back to his senses. "I thought you didn't eat it. It's very fragrant." "Guze, do you want one?" Lin Cece snickered as she ate. She knew that he didn't eat these things. Guze sighed. "No, I don't eat it." She nodded and said regretfully, "Actually, it's really delicious." Guze said helplessly, "Don't eat too much even if it's delicious. There will be your favorite skewers later." She nodded obediently and looked for tissues with her greasy hands. Guze grabbed her hands and wiped them for her. "Don't get them on your body." Lin Cece smiled at him. At this moment, Guze felt as if they had returned to the past. Her mind was more mature than before, and the feeling was even more wonderful. It was as if he had just started to fall in love. It was his first time, and it was also Cece's first time. Guze smiled faintly and reached out to open a bottle of beer for himself. Lin Cece nibbled on the rabbit head and asked, "Aren't you going to drive later?" "You open it," he said matter-of-factly. Lin Cece snorted. She grabbed a bottle of beer and finished half of it. "I can't open it now either." Guze glared at her and suddenly pulled her hair. "Are you disobedient?" Lin Cece leaned against his shoulder and chuckled. "You're just disobedient." She seemed to be drunk as she hugged his arm. "I'm not obedient."
Do you still want me?
At that moment, Guze's heart tightened. He thought back to that night when she had run to the hospital to ask him if he still wanted her, and the night he had rejected her. His heart tightened, and he reached out to hold her in his arms, hugging her very tightly. Her little face was pressed against his chest, and she could feel his heart beating very fast. "Guze." Lin Cece called his name, feeling a little uneasy. Guze's voice was suppressed. "Don't talk, Cece. Let me hold you for a while." She pursed her lips and said softly, "What's wrong with you?" Chapter 30, 217. She just buried herself in his arms and didn't say anything. They just snuggled up to each other and didn't say anything. After a long time, Guze let go of her and smiled. "Let's drink together." "Then who's going to drive?" She lay in his arms and asked in a soft voice. Guze held her and said, "I'll drive." As he spoke, he gave her a warm smile. Lin Cece immediately understood what he meant. She blushed and didn't say anything. The boss served a big pot of skewers, and Lin Cece sat next to Guze like a happy bird. He hadn't seen her like this for a long time. He rubbed her hair and ordered a few more beers. Guzé drank a little too much and was a little drunk, so was Lin Cece. They were both in high spirits. Later, she sat on his lap and ate, just like a normal young couple. He wasn't the high and mighty CEO of Hungtong, and she wasn't the Lin Cece of the entertainment industry. She became his little fool again, being fed by him and talking happily in his arms. Her eyebrows were as exquisite as a painting, which was his favorite look. Of course, she was also liked by others. Because she was so beautiful, she attracted the attention of some bad men around her. Lin Cece whistled first. Guzé glanced at her and pulled her up. He threw a dozen 100 yuan bills on the table and said, "Keep the change." There were about 5 or 6 men staring at Lin Cece's table. They were all quite young, in their 20s. Seeing that Guzé was about to leave, they immediately surrounded him and said, "Brother, you look quite rich. You want to leave so early?" Another man also chuckled and said, "Brother, don't tell me you're leaving? You have to let us have a look at such a beautiful girl." Guzé asked indifferently, "What do you want? Do you want money?" He took out all the money in his wallet. There was about 10,000 yuan in cash.
Take this.
You can go find a hot girl. Lin Cece tugged at his hand. "Guzé, you're insulting us women, just like them." Guzé patted her hand, signaling her not to make a sound. Lin Cece hugged his arm and hid behind him to watch the show. The leader came over, took the money, and smiled at Guzé. "Brother, you're insulting us. Why don't you be more thorough? Look at what you're wearing and the car you're driving. It's worth at least a few million. How about this? We brothers won't be greedy. Just give each of us 880,000 yuan. Guzé lowered his head and looked at Lin Cece. "Honey, do I have enough savings?"
No.
Lin Cece pouted. "Even if I sold you, I wouldn't get it. I borrowed the car and the house." Guzé looked over again. "Did you hear that? My wife doesn't agree." The leader, the yellow-haired man, pinched the cigarette between his fingers. "What a character, sister-in-law. You're willing to give up your chastity for money." The yellow-haired man turned his head, and someone immediately placed more than 20 bottles of beer on the table. Then he looked at Guzé and said, "Our rule here is that if you want to take away your girl, you have to fight one by one until you defeat us. Do you dare?" He gave Guzé a provocative look. Guzé looked at him and sneered. "You want me to fight all 6 of you? You can add your girl," the man said maliciously. Chapter 32:18. He picked up a bottle and said, "Didn't you want a drink?"
Come on.
He gave Lin Cece a look. Lin Cece pulled him and said, "You can't beat 6 people." "It's fine." He smiled. "Didn't you say you wanted to go to the bathroom? Here's the car key. Go, and get me some sobriety medicine." "I'm afraid I can't take it," Guzé said as he took off his jacket and handed it to Lin Cece. Lin Cece held his coat, took out the key from his pocket, and looked at him worriedly.
Go.
"Come back later, and see how I drink them down." He smiled and patted her. Lin Cece stared into his eyes. There was warmth in Guzé's eyes, and she could understand what he meant. She nodded and said softly, "Drink slowly. I'll come back after I go to the bathroom." Guzé smiled and watched her run towards the parking lot. Then he turned to look at the leader. "How about it? Let's drink 3 bottles first." The leader was still looking at Lin Cece's back and suddenly smiled. "This girl looks like a star." "Maybe so." Guzé also smiled, raised his head, and drank the whole bottle. The yellow-haired man didn't want to be outdone, and drank a bottle. Then the 2 of them finished 2 bottles together. Guzé was a little dizzy, but he still smiled and opened 10 more bottles, 5 bottles this time. The yellow-haired man smiled. "You're brave, but it's either your girl or you who serve us tonight. Have you thought it through? Do you want to get drunk?" Guzé glanced at these good-looking guys and smiled faintly. "Why don't I let my wife watch how I get on you one by one?" The yellow-haired man covered his face and laughed, and his brothers also laughed. In the end, the yellow-haired man looked at Guzé and said, "I can't tell. Do you think I'm an elite?" I'm so evil.
Come on, let's do it.
It's hard to say who will do it. Guze knew that he couldn't stop drinking when he was talking to this group of people. If he stopped, their heads would turn around. Therefore, he smiled while holding the bottle in his mouth and downing one cigarette after another. In the end, their yellow-haired boss vomited after drinking the third bottle. He was vomiting so much that he was almost foaming at the mouth. Guze looked around and smiled. Is there anyone else? Seeing that he was completely fine, his subordinates became a little timid. At this moment, Blondie spat and roared, "Kill him! Screw this pretty boy!" One of Yellow Hair's subordinates immediately stepped forward. "Let me compete with you." Guze opened a few more bottles with his slender fingers. 5 bottles per person. It's still the same. Do you want a drink? The man looked at it and swallowed his saliva.
Drink.
However, it was probably too much. He couldn't take the 4th bottle. He covered his mouth and spat it out. Guze continued to pick 2 more and drank for more. When it came to the 5th, he also felt that he couldn't take it anymore. However, there were still 2 people on the other side. He supported himself with one hand and opened another 10 bottles with the other. He raised his eyebrows and said to the black-haired man opposite him, "Comes." The black-haired man sneered. "I guess you won't be able to pass these 5 bottles." He had calculated. Guze had drunk more than 10 bottles in total. These 5 bottles would definitely be drunk. As long as he could endure these 5 bottles, he would be able to kill one of them. Guze looked at him pick up the bottle. He narrowed his eyes and was about to drink, but the bottle in his hand was grabbed by a delicate hand. Chapter 30:219. I'll drink with him. Lin Cece snatched the beer bottle from his hand and raised her head to drink a whole bottle. That heroic spirit made Little Black Feather, who was standing opposite, tremble. Lin Cece put down the empty bottle and picked up another one. 3 bottles were enough to knock the black-haired boy down. The last one didn't dare to drink anymore. He was cut by the yellow-haired boss. "You're so disloyal. You're worse than a woman." But no matter how he cut it, it shrank and refused to come out. Lin Cece smiled. "Can we go now?" The yellow-haired boy waved his hand. "Go, go. Don't let me see you again." Lin Cece smiled and squatted down. She stared at the yellow-haired boy. "I haven't killed you yet." She looked at Guze. "You?" Guze rolled his eyes at her. "I don't have such a hobby. Even if I do you think I can eat you, Lin Cece?" The yellow-haired boy heard this. Fuck, it really was that female star. Then this man was CEO Gu, who was worth hundreds of billions. The yellow-haired boy trembled and swallowed hard. He must have been blind not to know this great Buddha. If they really did it, CEO Gu, would they be killed by 1,000 people? Just thinking about it made the yellow-haired boy wet his pants. Lin Cece hugged Guze's arm and giggled. "Guze, you're having so much fun." The yellow-haired boy softened again. Sure enough, her surname was Gu. Guze twisted her ear. "I told you to go to the car first. Why did you come back?" Lin Cece smiled foolishly. "I came back to save the damsel in distress." "You're a coward, not a hero." Guze shook his head and walked out first. Lin Cece followed behind him and hugged his wallet. She threw the few thousand yuan at the yellow-haired boy. "You're so useless. Go and get your kidney treated." With that said, she hung on Guze's arm and walked out. Guze let her do as she pleased, looking very accommodating. The blonde softened and looked at his disappointing brothers again.
He sighed.
"What the hell? I actually believed in love again." The gray-haired and black-haired ones nodded in agreement. "Boss, us too." Blondie was covered in urine stains, but he didn't care at all, because he wasn't soaking in urine, but love. On the other side, Lin Cece hung on Guze's arm and asked softly, "Guze, do you really not want to vomit?"
"No."
He snorted coldly. He was still angry at her for coming back. Lin Cece held back her laughter. "But looking at your face, it looks like you're holding back. You want to go to the toilet." "Shut up," he said harshly. Lin Cece secretly laughed. "Guze, I suddenly realized that you are very manly. You actually didn't call the police. Men have their ways. He finally couldn't help turning his head to look at her. Lynn Cece, I don't want you to think that I'm a man who only has a little money. But you have a lot of money, and I like your money. She secretly laughed and exposed him. Guze was angry. Lynn Cece. Will I be punished for telling the truth? Lynn Cece blinked, looking pure and mischievous. Guze finally couldn't help it. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. He kissed and bit her. Lynn Cece, I really want to kill you. Lynn Cece's eyes were pure. Guze, you drank so much. Are you okay? He stared at her. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.